All right, so we're going to get John hooked up here next. And John, I tell you, it's been a real good ride for you, huh, lately, with a lot of the stuff going on and doing your single-page applications. And I tell you, every one of your sessions is packed, but not only your sessions, a lot of other folks that are doing similar content at code camps. So you always see the rooms packed, you know, for this particular topic. So why don't we start out with having you say a little bit about yourself and then answer why are people so interested in this? What's it going to do for us?
Sure. My name is John Papa, and I've done a lot of things. So lately I'm working a lot in the JavaScript and web space. I've been a Microsoft evangelist before, like Russ. Yeah. And in the past I've done a lot of consulting as well. And lately I'm working on a lot of SPA and JavaScript and HTML and helping people take applications they need to write and then basically get them onto all the different kinds of devices that are out there.
Cool. And John's also, by the way, a Microsoft Regional Director as well.
Yes, I am.
So go ahead, proceed here.
Cool. Am I projecting? I'm projecting. Cool. So one cool thing about sitting in a chair is that nobody can tell that I am shorter than everybody else up here.
Except for me. I think I won on this one.
Nobody cares about you, Brian. So basically, what I want to talk a little about in 15 minutes here is kind of what's the deal with all this SPA stuff that's out there. We've got all these different frameworks that we can deal with. And quite frankly, in 15 minutes, I couldn't even tell you how many frameworks that there are. It seems like just in the time that Russ was talking, that another 10 or more were created. And if you check on Twitter, they probably were. But really, what are the ones that are most popular out there? And that's Angular and Durandal. And the reason these appeal to me is because they seem to hit that sweet spot of doing most of the dirty plumbing that you need to get done for you. So you can focus on your app. You don't have to worry about all the stuff like showing screens and putting in dependency injection and all the stuff that we kind of just come to love in like .NET in the WinRT world. So you're here and you're thinking at this point you're really confused on how to build a SPA. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be listening at this point. If you knew what you were doing, you probably wouldn't go there. But the biggest reason to build a SPA, I've got to tell you, is one thing, and that's because all the cool kids are doing it, right? No. So you want to use a presentation framework. Why? Because you want to reduce the amount of time that you're spending on monotony and plumbing so you can focus on building the stuff that your employer is asking you to do. And how many times are you going to build an app, walk into your employer's office, and you know they're like asking you, it's been 3 months, you're building this app, where's the first screen? And you're like, well, I've got to build the plumbing, the web services, and everything else and get it in place. And they're like, I want to see something. Well, if you use some kind of presentation framework, it makes it a lot easier. So if you want to be like one of these cool kids up here, kind of like the Scots, you know, you want to use a presentation framework or some of your other favorite rock stars out there. But why do you want to use one? The big reason is to reduce that plumbing, you know, to handle that monotony, and you want to focus on the user stories so you can basically get your job done. So you can build stuff like this. Now we're going to talk about 2 main frameworks. I'm going to show a little code of each and kind of show you how they can help you reduce your time. So instead of spending a ton of your time on a presentation framework in a project and basically rolling your own, you can do things like testing and actually work on the user stories that your users really care about. You know, how often do you walk into a stakeholder meeting with your project and show them, look at this really cool, you know, plumbing that I put into the application? And they're like, yeah, but does it do what I need? So you want to focus on that kind of stuff, or the rich data, the security, and those user stories. So let's take a look at a couple demos. First, we're going to take a look at Durandal, and then we'll take a look at Angular. Too many libraries. So in the Durandal demo, let's just look and see what it actually runs first. We'll kick this up. And when you use Durandal, one of the reasons people like to use it is because it's based on top of Knockout.js. So if you're familiar with Knockout.js, then basically you're going to get a whole lot of bang for your buck by using Durandal because it's very, very familiar. You get all that data binding goodness that you get. And here we get a fictitious app that's a code camp, like one we're at here today for Atlanta, although we're not fictitious here. And you got all our data loading up here. And one of the cool things you can look at is inside of a SPA. Notice I went to sessions and I went to speakers, and I'll do that again in a moment to show you. I'm in the network tab. Now it's refresh. From scratch, I'm reloading. Here's all my calls across the network. Let's actually look just at our XHR calls, which should be over here. My screen is really tiny. There we go. XHR is all of our network calls to get our HTML in this case, and then to get our data. So here we can see lookup data came across, and there's some JSON, some speakers, so on and so forth. Now watch how cool this is. I'm on the speakers page. I go to sessions. Actually, before I do that, let's clear this out. So now I have no more network traffic. I go to sessions. Now I'm getting the session data here. That's my JSON for sessions. Let's clear it again. Let's go back to speakers where I just came from. No more network traffic. I go back to sessions again. No more network traffic. Now if I dive into a specific session to go see Scott Guthrie here, I haven't been there before, so now it's going to getting all the details for that particular record. The cool part about this is, if let's say you're in a scenario, and this is great for SPA, you're walking around a conference where Wi-Fi is really poor. You load your application up before you get there, and then the Wi-Fi goes down somewhere along the way. Never happens, right? And then you're walking around, and then all of a sudden you want to get to a session. Oh, God, I got to figure out where's Russ's session. What room's he in? You can pull up the app, no Wi-Fi, because you've already loaded it here. The data's already cached locally in the browser. You can navigate right to where a session is. So as long as you've done that, all that's there. No local storage or anything. It's all actually inside your browser, which is really, really cool. Now you can make it such that it tombstones, using a common word in the WinRT world, where if you shut down the browser and then you bring it back out, it saves a local storage and loads too. So both the apps in Durandal and Angular will do this for you. Now in the Durandal side, let's look at some of our HTML. So here we're inside of a sessions HTML, and you'll see a lot of this data bind. Basically, this is the data binding syntax where we get data-bind and we tell it, what am I binding to? I'm binding to the text of this attribute. And then I'm going to take the tags formatted property and stick it in here. Or I take the speaker full name. Or I can take the title of the session, and I'm binding it to it. So I'm using declarative syntax to say, declaratively bind this property to a property that doesn't exist yet. That'll come up here. Now, inside of Knockout and Durandal, because Durandal's built on Knockout, you're going to see these little parentheses in there.
Did you say Durandal's built on Knockout?
Yes, Durandal's built on Knockout. Knockout is the data binding engine in Durandal. So you'll see speaker, weird parentheses, dot full name. Now let's go over to the Angular app, and let's go look at the same HTML. Here's my views folder. Here's my speakers I think I was looking at. No, sessions. Now if I go down to look for the word title, see the same thing. There we go. Notice down here I see s.title. Little different syntax. I'm using little mustaches to say go s.title. That's its data binding syntax for Angular. And then here it's the speaker full name. Biggest difference isn't just the mustaches in this case, because that's just syntactical sugar. But notice here it's speaker.fullname. Over in the other app, in Durandal Knockout, notice you got these funky little parentheses. Very easy to type this kind of code in Durandal and Knockout, run the app, and there's no error because you don't see anything. So that's one of the nice advantages of the Angular side is you can just bind up directly to the objects and just use regular dot notation with Angular out of the box. Now, Durandal has a plugin that allows you to do that if you're using an ECMAScript 5 browser. So IE9, IE10, IE11, Chrome, Firefox, you're good to go.
I hate those parentheses.
Me too.
Man, darn.
Those darn parentheses. So that's one big difference, and that's one of the way people choose between the two. Something people really get into is the dependency injection as well that both these guys have. Now, in Durandal, you use a require.js library to do dependency injection. It's built on top of it. So if we flip over there, we'll show you why dependency injection is important. So we've got all these JavaScript files. Loading them in the right order is really important. Well, what if you have 100 of them? You've got to get them in the right sequence so the right ones come in before the ones that need it come in. In .NET, we use Ninject, Unity, other kinds of containers to do dependency injection. Java has the same thing. In JavaScript, we have a library called require.js, which Durandal uses. So instead, when I open up some kind of a file in JavaScript, like this session details, up top, you're going to see all my dependencies listed. I'm listing out, I want this particular session detail page to go use my data context module, to go use my router, get config, and then right below it, it resolves those to these variables. So you tell it what are those dependencies in the constructor injection, and then which variables are you going to set for those.
So what that's doing is putting all your references in the correct order then? That is what that's doing?
Yeah, it's basically saying that as soon as you use, the first thing you use, if it's this page, it's going to say stop before you use it. Tell me what you need, I'll go get it. And it might have chains down the path where it has to go get other things, which is great because you don't want to have to figure that out yourself. Now it uses require.js to do that because that's a very, very popular, common, conventional standard out there. Angular has its own dependency injection. So if we go look at the same page, or a similar page, at the top, you're not going to see that define syntax. Instead, you're going to see them very similar. Where I say, for this controller, for this page, go get all these dependencies. That's the strings. And they have to be strings because that's how it looks up the dependencies. It says, go find this thing called a bootstrap dialog that I wrote, a common, a data context to go get my data. And then when you get those, inject them into my constructor for my controller. Both concepts are synonymous, and the syntax is just slightly different, but both concepts really help you build modular apps, and they get you beyond that to-do sample. Does this put them in a specific order? I'll answer that in two ways. If you mean on the index page where you actually put your script tags in there, it will not sequence your script tags. You still have to pull them in. But generally what people will do is they'll use a minifier to minify all their files and bundle them together. And in Angular, the sequence of your code that you write is irrelevant. All you have to do is put all your code after Angular loads. So Angular goes first. Then you put your JavaScript files in there, and if you can bundle them, that's one line. And then what it does is, I don't care if you put them in any order, I'm going to just find them as needed. So let's say an example. In my index HTML, I have a lot of JavaScript, and let's scroll down to the bottom, because you always put your JavaScript at the bottom of the page, because that helps the perceived performance. And up top here, I'm loading in Angular and other libraries, and then I'm loading in all of my scripts in alphabetical order. Why? That's not the order they load. That's just easy for me to find them later. So if I have to change things, I can do that. So all my common stuff goes up top, and then you'll see my controllers are completely alphabetical. Now, if I bundled that, I'd have a lot less code, but it still wouldn't matter what order they went in. And Durandal will do that for you, just in a slightly different way. It actually uses require.js again to help you bundle those. And then it uses, it's got its own little exe called the optimizer, which will bundle them. And if we look at how it works in there, at the bottom of Durandal, I've already bundled them. And right below Durandal, I just put this one line and say, use require.js, go find app main, that's my bootstrapping module, and then it's going to find all my JavaScript files for me and bundle them and minify them and put them in one package for me. So you're getting, the ultimate moral of the story is you're getting the same things out of both frameworks. It's which syntax are you more comfortable with? And if you like Knockout, you're going to love Durandal. If you're not into any of them at this point, what I suggest is you kind of look at both of them, try them out.
Yeah, I think your point is really they're both pretty equivalent, I think, in really what they offer.
They are.
That's good takeaway from this. And I know the guys are fairly local that wrote the Durandal one too, down in Tallahassee there, and Rob, right, Eisenberg?
Rob Eisenberg.
Yeah, put that together. So he's been working on that, what, about 3 years or so, I think he started the project, and now it's good to see it's spreading, you know, so people are starting to pick up and use that particular framework, which is going to really make your life a whole lot easier. It takes care of, what was the four key things these frameworks take care of? Remember you had that highlighted in the session we talked about before, was the life
Here's
management.
Here's a quiz for you, yes.
The life management, I'm asking you, because I can't
Lifecycle
remember all four.
management.
Right?
Yep, lifecycle management, view orchestration to get your views on the page, routing, because most apps have more than one page, right? And dependency injection.
Right. So Knockout doesn't take care of all of that. That's really your objects, right? You're looking at in your code. And that's where you know, coming from a structured background, maybe in .NET or something like that, that's where you start creating, you know, your records, what are all the fields and everything, you know, in those. And that's where Knockout comes in handy, because now you have that look and feel. But that's part of the story. The rest of it is here.
Absolutely. And, you know, either way you go, you're going to be in a good place. And the one story I like to tell everybody is that, you know, if you like things that are made by Google, then you'll like Angular.
Well, that's it. So you got Google versus Rob.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
As far as that, but that's not a bad thing either, right? So it's good to have some choices in there, because even Google, right? They change their minds a lot of times, and you got a product one day, and the next day you don't. I mean, that's happened. So you gotta take these things into consideration in terms of your roadmap when you're building these things. We'll take a quick question from the audience, then we'll move on to Tara. If anybody's got any questions.
Yeah, in previous versions of Durandal, it had sort of incorporated, I think, with Sammy, the history, so you could do, you know, get to different pages or go back. Is that in Durandal, or not Durandal, in Angular?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So basically, you're asking about is the routing in both the frameworks, in Durandal and Angular. So 2 points on that. One is there's routing built into Durandal, as you mentioned. In version 1.x, they had used sammy.js to do the routing. Rob and I kind of worked on that a little bit, and I kind of coaxed him in that area, and neither one of us truly loved how Sammy worked. So in Durandal 2, he wrote his own router from scratch. So Durandal 2 has a brand new router module that you can plug in, and is actually much better, much richer. On the Angular side, they have their own router, which you can pull in as a module just like you can in Durandal. And it's got very similar features, so you can tap into events of when pages start and when pages go away. So yes, you have all those core modules in both of them. And you don't have to pull the router module in. If you truly want to build a one-page app with only one screen, you can do that too.
All right, well, thank you very much, John. Give it up for John Papa. Wasn't that awesome? What a show. Well, there's lots more to come, so stay connected.